Welcome everybody. Kia ora koutou. My name is Frida Wells. I'm Comms Engagement for the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee. I'm really excited about today's talk, and it's wonderful to be able to leverage technology and have this hybrid format. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all today to the Urban Design Toolkit talk with Alan Whiteley of WSP. We are fortunate to have Thomas Nash, Councillor for Greater Wellington Regional Council, here to do the official welcome and introduction. A standard reminder that the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee is a union of councils, government bodies, the Wellington Wellington region, here to address our shared challenges and opportunities. And there's a wonderful quote, is that knowledge is not knowledge until it's shared. So the format here is really just about sharing learnings and not needing to have all the answers ourselves, but to ask others questions as well and really build in that shared kite and learning as we go. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Thomas.
Thanks, Frida. Kia ora, everyone. So my name's Thomas Nash. I'm a regional councillor for Greater Wellington, based in the Pōneke Wellington constituency, and I chair our transport committee. So we have a big public transport network that we are responsible for in the Wellington region. And yeah, really pleased to be here to introduce. I won't say much. I'll hand over to Alan from WSP very shortly, but just to say a shout out to Catherine Knight from Greater Wellington, who's been commissioning a bunch of good work in the kind of emissions reduction and housing and urban development space. One of the, I guess the genesis of this report from our perspective at Greater Wellington was the Wellington Transport Emissions Reduction Pathway, which sort of sets out how we can most effectively, most efficiently, most cost effectively reduce transport emissions. Transport emissions being a big portion of the wider emissions profile for the region and the country. And one of the best ways to do that, one of the most cost-effective ways to reduce transport emissions, is to change urban form so that it's easier and cheaper for people to get around because they live close to where they work and hang out and want to go. So rather than living far away in suburbs where they're sort of forced to use a car. So that's kind of the genesis. One last thing I'll say before handing over to Alan is that I think one of the gaps in the housing and urban development conversation that we've been having as a country, and I think this is true for a lot of countries, is the sort of visualization of what it might look like when we have higher density housing. And I think people sort of, there's quite a lot of scaremongering in the media, and I guess, in conversations that we have with friends, that our neighborhood's going to be ruined by high density housing. It's going to look terrible, and it's terrible design, and it's bad, blah blah blah. And I think we have a duty as people working in this area to show visually that it can actually look really good and be really good and be positive from a community and a neighbourhood point of view. And I think this report does this quite effectively. So hopefully we can get it out and about and use it as a strong communications tool, because it is designed to be accessible for people who are non-experts. So with that, I will hand it over to Alan. Over to you.
All right, very good. Hello everybody online. Glad you can hear me. All right. So my name is Alan Whiteley. I head up the landscape architecture and urban design team for WSP, and we've had great opportunity to work with the regional council, with Catherine, and with Grant to develop this. As Thomas was saying, there was an intention from the very beginning to visualize and demystify the policies and statements and help empower our communities to advocate for great communities that also look at densities. So with the regional population of Wellington actually growing by 7% in the last 6 years, and that's against relatively little growth in the city, our regional community will be shaped by the inevitable population and associated infrastructure needs and climate impacts. So while we can't accurately project the future, we can be sure that our urban realm will not be the same as the immediate past, and one of the best ways to predict our future is to design it. What we can be certain of, though, is that our urban areas develop and as climate change, so we've had record highs again this year, becomes an unwavering factor in development, we will need to look at reducing resource and energy demands and be more integrated with ecological systems for us to identify a healthy and deliver a healthy future. This basically means, in terms of urban development, more people across less land. Future communities will require long-term visions. This doesn't exist at the political cycle of 3 years, and ecologically sound decisions that lay down the groundwork for intergenerational wide order or well-being, thriving local communities, economies, urban connectivity, human and environmental resilience. Wellington Regional Transport Emissions Reduction Pathway considers strategic shifts such as the shape of urban form, making shared and active modes more attractive, and motivating people to travel differently. Essentially, this urban design toolkit is centered on that first shift of shaping urban form. Seen many examples across the country of urban expansion with limited mixed-use developments that have reinforced the need for cars, and this document looks aspirationally towards what future connected, denser regional living could look like. Its message sort of originates, as we were discussing earlier, from the lower transport emissions, VKT vehicle kilometers traveled, and also looking at demographic studies, which link to quality of the life for people and integrating with the natural environment and publicly accessible connectivity. So there's a couple of documents out there, which people are going to ask, where does it sit in relationship to them? So we have the NPSCD and the medium density regional standards, and they provide great rules and standards and requirements, and they have a really important role. This toolkit aims to visually join the dots of policy and what that actually looks like on the ground, and we're trying to bring some colour to black and white statements, essentially. This toolkit intends to empower our communities in understanding that regional density can deliver great outcomes, and ideally that they then become advocates themselves rather than opposers. And so we look to see them in, say, consultation or community lobbying developments, or really going out there and best for their future. Also for the Regional Council, to use this as a tool to promote and guide developers towards better outcomes, better for communities and the environment, but also to encourage diverse range of investment from developers. So just to summarise, the Urban Design Toolkit supports reduced transport emissions by demonstrating an urban design vision for the region, provides an accessible toolbox for non-experts to influence better outcomes for their community, and it demonstrates best practice that can be applied to a range of contexts. Finally, it supports regional and district policies such as the Regional Policy Statement and district plans with practical guidance. Just wanted to just acknowledge the people in the team very quickly. So team major, so we've got Grant and Catherine's guidance on all of this, which is being really well received, so thank you for that. But also Hayley Hooper worked as the principal on this, supported by Daniela and Alex. And this, I think, just to acknowledge the relationship in the group, was that there was one of listening, understanding. It was actually, this whole project came from a relationship that started with Grant in this room, in a symposium about something I can't remember right now, but that ended up into a discussion about kind of like-minded, and then coming back on a separate meeting and discussing what issues were on the table. So it's a foundation of trust and listening and developing, and that kind of energy has run throughout the project all the way through. So really positive project to be working on. All right, so I'm going to run through how we came up to where we were. So there's a bit of background as to where we ended up. We started off with research and benchmarking. So the foundations of it sits on a deep study of local, regional, national and international policies and studies, which covered a range of topics and documents such as Sustainable Development Goals, Paris Agreement, National Policy Statements, Emissions Reduction Plan, Regional Land Transport Plan, the Future Development Strategies and iwi Management Plans and Strategies. And we used all of this data to kind of pull together themes for a toolkit, which we converted into place pillars, which we're going to go on to in the next couple of slides. The key themes that really came up over again: nature and communities, and create functioning and connected urban environments. We then went into a benchmarking exercise, examples of what can be achieved in terms of sustainable placemaking at a range of scales. These case studies are both international and local and exemplify compact, mixed-use urban places that are connected and responsive to natural environments. The case studies are at different scales that span rural, suburban, local centre and urban centre that you can see on the transect here. Yeah, and we have considered local place references for us to envision what these could look like. So we've looked at various different transects here and gone, okay, well, that's similar to Porirua or Parapararumu, and then that's helped us guide what kind of typologies we can then pull into prototypes of scenarios, which we then develop. The relationship between these different scales of urban form are shown. Moving on to the place pillars. So these are the big place pillars that we have come up with after the research. So in order to assess these necessary benchmarks that we've collected, we've collated our place pillars and chose our prototype spaces, which we have developed and to show how intensification in regional areas pass that through a sort of an aperture of quality or to hold ourselves to standards. We've got these 6 place pillars that are as follows. So we've got Nahairinga, or Journeys of Place. So this is about future communities that are designed around walkability, being able to access most things in everyday life by walking, cycling, or a short trip by public transport. This allows people to connect to the places, the peoples, the localities important to them, and helps create vibrant, people-friendly neighbourhoods. The 2 of those, Pitamata, so a resilient place. So important are neighbourhoods, towns and cities of the future are resilient in the face of changing climates and utilise less energy and resources. Sustainable urban design will help deliver on the reduction of resource and energy use and greenhouse gas emissions, as well as enhance and care for nature through water-sensitive urban design, something we've tried to pull into the scenario designs later on. Wai Ora, so vibrant local economies. So need to have sort of promoting mixed-use developments. So that's kind of retail, business and light industrial mix. And that supports a diversity of activities within a compact area, supporting vibrant and diverse local economies and socially connected communities. Quite often the idea of thriving economies or attracting business can be overlooked when we're and the environment, but it's money talks, and it will, as long as we guide the right investment, then we end up hopefully with the right outcome. Orangataya, so that's nature in place. So that's our future urban communities will be designed in a way that protects, restores and enhances the natural environment. This will enable people to reconnect with nature in the places they live and work and create for more resilient urban spaces. So for example, we're talking about the falling of trees, water regulating of wetlands, enhancing the effect of green corridors and pollinated paths and stuff like that that integrate into the urban environment. Number 5 is Kāinga Tipu. It's healthy people and communities. So at the heart of making a well-functioning society are communities in which people's social, cultural and economic needs are met. Good urban design will help create public safety, a sense of connection to place, a sense of community cohesion, ownership and stewardship, very important. And it can also meaningfully contribute to the affordability and quality of life. And finally, Patarikura, so that's expressive place, character and identity. Each place that we visit, and we've approached this from a prototypical view because its own identity and character, and it's very important that they are able to sing in themselves. Each place very unique, and we need to celebrate place in a way of acknowledging these special assets and make one place distinct from the next. Sense of place supported by a quality built environment, streetscape, public realm, open space, and great connection with our communities, as well as important relationships to nature. So in terms of the benchmarks we chose, so I've only pulled off a couple today, and I advise everyone to go into the link that we have to explore further. We've explored sort of local, regional and international, and I'm just going to share with you a couple. We looked at 2 standout ones. One was Toyota, that's based in Dunedin, and also Cohouse, that was based in Grey Lynn in Auckland. So this project, Toyota, is New Zealand's first Passive House co-housing developments with 21 certified Passive House Classic standard homes. So that's from 1 to 5 bedrooms and also their own private outdoor area. Part of the former school buildings around there have also been modified to accommodate a large communal community centre with a designing and meeting rooms. L-shaped distribution, and that shelters a large common garden that acts as a barrier for the main streets. Benefit of designing and building row houses has thermal efficiency with reduced heat loss due to the shared walls. An array of great qualities, including passive house principles, community gardens with food production, bike storage and EV chargers, to name just a few, and we go into much more detail in the toolkit. This example came under the suburban transect and related to areas such as Porirua and Waikanae and Upper Hutt. And another one I want to share today is sort of a really good example was Co-House. So this is located in Grey Lynn in Auckland. Co-House is a medium density residential development in Grey Lynn, Auckland, comprised of 20 dwellings ranging from apartments to terrace houses, and is a cohesive community on a single site that is well integrated with the surrounding environment. So just as an example of how we're sort of processing the benchmarks through our place pillars. So in terms of journey of place, Co-House includes on-site bike storage and shares electric car system, which maximizes convenience and minimizing private vehicle use. From a resilient place perspective, it maximized solar gain through building and landscape design and stormwater management through water-sensitive urban design. From a vibrant local economies perspective, it has an on-site studio which provides a communal working environment for residents. Through Nature in Place, it has living environments that centre around common garden area, and that has shared productive gardens and an orchard. From the fifth pillar, which is healthy people and communities, Co-Houses encourage social participation through its shared spaces, creating a cohesive community. Finally, through expressive place, character and identity, the architectural form is sensitive to the surrounding urban environment, and the development kept an existing villa that was on the site, incorporating this home into the development. So when we're building up our story of how to design these various scenarios, we're passing them through sort of a rigorous assessment of the place pillars. So having selected our scenarios at different scales based on our transect analysis and with consideration to our review of strategic documents and benchmarks, we needed to also look at who we're looking for before designing our prototypical urban spaces that incorporate the 6 pillars. So what we've done is we took a demographic study on the types of people that would live in this areas. So we've done a whole bunch of studies against the personas that live in particular, that could live in particular areas. And we've looked at their lives, what their wants, their desires, generational desires, what people that high are going to want when they're that high in 25 years, and really passed all of our design decisions through their eyes. So it comes from a position of grounding design decisions through the community's eyes. So we've done 4 transects. Today, we're going to look at the local centre scenario. This is sort of to encourage everyone to go into the toolkit and explore the other scenarios that we've done. This is the larger scale scenario. This was aimed at local centres across the region, although it was sort of triggered through looking at Porirua, although it to become much more generic and to fit a number of examples around the region. This has been designed to show how over time we could retrofit quality suburban car-oriented developments and safe environments. In the design toolkit, you'll see this final version, but you'll also see how it's developed over 3 or 4 stages. We've got like 0 to 15, 15 to 25, and then 25 plus years. So see how where do we start? What do we do first? What do we implement? We've looked at various different things such as making and catalytic projects and tactical urbanism and water-sensitive urban design as sort of first interventions, which really start to piece together a long-term vision over time. All right, so as we look at the overall scenario, so this one is the plus 25-year vision. We've collected a series of interventions that integrate the place pillars into design that are meaningful and sensitive to the urban environment. Here we see the placement of the NACO, or heart of place. which is positioned centre of the two main roads. You can see an axis there, sort of pink in the middle there. And it operates with direct view of the railway transport mobility hub. We can see how we get sort of cross formation of nodes and hubs as we go from top to the bottom of development, and also crossways from the transport hub to the residential communities on the other axis. What we now see as we've developed this is a cascading effect of hierarchy of spaces. We've got adaptive reuse and urban renewal that allows for existing buildings to become well integrated with new ones. We see the use of biophilic design that allows for green spaces, even in dense urban environments, and actually critical to dense urban environment ecosystems. We see spaces for public art and placemaking that reinforce the urban and community identity and narratives in the context of the area, but also in localized spaces. So, for example, if you look at the sort of pink areas we've located at the sites, they provide localized character that ties into an overarching neighborhood identity. You'll also see these icons here, which will go on to the next slide, which relate to the pulling it back to our place pillars again. So on the mobility hub there, we encourage a variety of modes of transportation, such as public transport and micromobility, integration of active transport. The mix of land uses and density around the railway station has maximised the potential while staying connected to the wider hub. This ensures that mobility across short and long distances without reliance of car ownership, which is a key fundamental factor that relates back to the genesis of where this all comes from. Compact and mixed-use neighbourhoods, so densification of neighbourhoods with a mix of retail, commercial, office and residential buildings, complemented by a series of plazas, pocket parks and play spaces. And we've also integrated water-sensitive streets, which include native planting, tree canopy coverages, swales, rain gardens and permeable materials for stormwater regulation, cooling and biodiversity. It also provides traffic calming and amenity outcomes. And we've engaged diversity in housing. So this really encourages diversity in neighbourhood culture and allows for more socio-economic inclusion. This provides housing choices and meets the need of diverse residents and household types, such as professionals, singles, young families, retirees, and people. That comes through our studies of various personas and demographics. Community allotments has been put in, and this really aims to mitigate the end cost of food, provide fresh produce and contribute a sense to the community. Stewardship and ownership on the community are absolutely key to feeling placed. Access to shared facilities that can function as marketplaces also enable markets selling produce and goods. And then also we had Cultural Intervention Centre. So Cultural Innovation Centre. So a Cultural Innovation Centre with Parklands adjoining social and civic amenity to the wider area and region, as well as a key anchor and destination for the local centre. So we then went on to take those prototypical scenario designs and produce perspectives, which in many ways kind of speak for themselves. And, they've been around the houses, and we've tried to produce exactly what the vision of that future may look like. So we've chosen some key points throughout the scenarios. So for this particular scenario, we've chosen mixed-use laneway. We've also chosen urban neighbourhood living. We've looked at streets and also urban agriculture. This one's the perspective view of the mixed-use laneway. So it provides an environment for pedestrian focus, spill-out spaces with mixed-use residential, food, retail and office space. Natural materials and green networks sort of penetrate the spaces to soften it up and encourage people out onto the streets to enjoy people-scaled, safe, and ultimately intimate environment within the urban fabric. So I've done one for urban neighbourhood living. So that's an example of medium to high density living. So important just to note that lots of activity, lots of community, lots of interaction, engagement. Quite warm spaces, soft spaces, not cold spaces from the buildings, and hardscape in form that sort of wraps around community safe space for a sense of ownership and safety. And you can see how we've taken that from toy order. So I looked at urban agriculture. So that's intended to be little pockets of productive green spaces that are integrated and focus on community collaboration. We provide a series of productive lands and small community markets that function commercially as well as aesthetically to ensure that people stay engaged with their environment. And finally, we looked at Green Street. So bit of a larger scale, so large collaboration of art, activity, recreation, business, retail, multimodal that runs through the hub and connects the site together. This aims to provide potential destination offering that encourages businesses and visitors from further afield and also encourages cross-pollination across the regional centres. Right, so just a little taster of the other 3 scenarios we have done. So we had a look at the single site scenario. And again, we've done all the analysis behind it. When you go into the toolkit, there's benchmarks, perspective, demographics, personas, and sort of build up the story as to why we've done what we have. And also passed the design and assessed it against the place pillars. We've also done neighbourhood street scenarios. And we've also done the community precinct scenario. All right, so if you'd like to see how we've developed them any further, really invite you to follow the link for the Urban Design Toolkit. Keen for feedback, but also most of all, keen to come together as our own community, which is about the exciting future that regional density has to offer. Thank you very much.
So yeah, if you have thoughts or reflections or questions, just raise your hand.
Great, thanks so much, Ellie. Ray Chung, Wellington City Council.
Hey.
It seems what you've described here is a whole lot of different scenarios, but they all seem to have the same theme of greater intensification. And is this actually what people want? And so, like, you can do all these happy family photos with lots of people gathering together, but to me, that photo looks like it's a university campus or something. And I noticed that right at the beginning, when you started your presentation, the image that you had there was of single dwelling houses, so it wasn't of this great intensification. So do you envisage seeing this in Wellington where you can actually take an area, a large sort of plot, and then setting this sort of scenario up?
Yeah, right, yes. The answer is yes. You know, we've done some deep research, both internationally and regionally, so around Australasia as well. This is where it's heading. There is regional growth. It is happening. All right. And there's several ways we can do it. We can continue in a way that impacts our environment in a negative way. We can get proactive about it and stay ahead of it and ultimately try and what I see as cultural shift that's needed to show that people can have a really positive living experience living in higher density housing that connects to other people and neighborhoods and good amenities rather than the quarter acre dream that ultimately can keep people separated and not many people can afford anymore. Is that this is getting ahead of the inevitable, doing it to ourselves before it happens to us in an uncontrolled way that impacts and creates long-term problems for the environment and communities. So what we're trying to do is create a document that encourages people to make that shift from not sure about that, sounds like it could be a real problem, to, oh, actually, this is a desirable outcome for us. And that's what we're working hard to achieve.
I guess what I'd like to see is I'd like to see this try something. Like if you pick an area, say pick an area in Wellington where there's a lot of land in a sort of assigned that size, then build this complex and see how many people actually want to go and live like that. Because I just feel as if
it's a good idea.
We're telling people what to do. We're telling people where to live. We're telling people how they should be travelling. Whereas shouldn't we be looking at what people want to do and helping them to do those things?
Yeah, absolutely. And community engagement on this is absolutely fundamental and key. Yeah, agree.
Number one point to make is none of this is dictating to people how they should live, because, you know, what we are really promoting here is that there's a range of typologies. But I guess people can't choose to live in places like this if they don't exist. And I think what WSP, the team at WSP, have done such a great job at is showing that you can have everything. You can still have your private spaces, you can have your communal spaces, you can have engagement, intergenerational engagement, etc. It also costs a lot less if you're not having to hop in a car to do everything from getting a bottle of milk to dropping your kids off. It costs a lot less to the householder. But our recent research we also commissioned from Sense Partners is that it also costs a lot less for the government at all levels to do the provision of infrastructure.
Yeah.
And densification is a little bit of a dirty word, but we prefer probably compact. If you encourage more compact urban design around existing infrastructure, It's actually over even the short term, it's going to cost the government a lot less. Every time we build longer and longer roads and whatever to service, or three waters to service, greenfield, sprawling greenfield on the urban periphery, the community has to cover the cost of that maintenance ongoing, and we're seeing already, the huge shortfalls and deficits in that respect. But I think what this is doing is not trying to dictate to people. Totally agree. We should not be dictating to people what they want, but it is a space where New Zealand hasn't done as well as other jurisdictions in providing this choice of different ways of living. One final thing I would say about something like this, for example, is that we know that something that is reaching pandemic type proportions throughout the Western developed world is loneliness, through not just older people as we might expect, but younger people too, because people are becoming more and more disconnected from each other. So this is also something that this could potentially really well address, allowing people to commingle and connect. But it's also too. So that's another thing I'd say, is it's another win in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. That's awesome.
Questions in the chat.
Dylan Clip has asked, how do we get developers to commit to this kind of development where it's needed? Talk, it's absolutely great, but councils often aren't in the business of developing. So I'm not sure if anyone's got thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the question was, the toolkit is great, but how do we get developers to come on board? This is a really big question. I think the same response also applies here, is that through what we're hoping, because this is not a regulatory tool, it's really important to realise this is not forcing anyone to do this. Again, it's about allowing people to visualise other possibilities, including developers. And through things like this does go into more perhaps the economic tools and the toolkit, through incentives and disincentives, things like development contributions and so on, we know that we can start to shift things. That sits outside what a toolkit can do, because this is, guidance only. But it's a really good question. But I do think it starts in the same way as this conversation is, by getting in the room with developers and, talking about what maybe the barriers. We'd be potentially surprised. I think there'd be lots of developers in New Zealand that'd be keen to do more of this stuff, but there's barriers, right? And
again, it pulls it back to showing people what good looks like, and people then advocating for that and wanting that it becomes desirable. As generations go up, they typically, through a trend, they exist in and are more adaptable to more denser areas. And so they're this high now. They're going to be buyers by the time these developments are done. So we need to understand what the future requirements are, and then potentially, ideally, it becomes market driven.
So about building their social license as well. I've got some comments praising the toolkit.
I'll take that.
Sky Halford is in Christchurch. She's commented, there's a lot of high-density housing going up in the Christchurch CBD. While I live there, however, without the sufficient public transport networks, it's kind of like a nightmare. Does one thing have to come up before the other?
Yeah, I mean, these things happen in stages. Yes, is the answer. These things have to come in stages, and it's a sort of push forward one, push forward the other, push forward the other. You can't. It's very difficult to do a clean sweep across existing public realm.
And just to add to what Alan has said, however, it is a lot, because we're, the team that commissioned this is actually Regional Transport here at Greater Wellington. Yeah. It's a lot cheaper to service neighbourhoods that are already within the urban footprint through good, effective, high-frequency public transport than it is to keep on having to extend the service out and out and out. So it actually makes sense economically as well to do that. But yes, it must be integrated, absolutely.
There, one in the room. Hi there.
I've got a list you want from two community groups, Historic Places Wellington and Live Wellington, which is an community advocate for density done well. Okay. Look, thank you for including the character and identity issue in your 5 foundational pillars. The word heritage is often not used, and it's not used in your document, I notice. I was just going to make a comment that we've just gone through this massive liberalisation of urban design planning. So we now have the most unregulated urban space in tier 1 cities in New Zealand in the history of this country.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a massive change, not for the better, I personally believe, and the groups that I'm involved in believe. But you are a multinational company. To what extent, this is my question, you are a multinational company. There are some aspects of Wellington and of New Zealand which are very specific to the environment. If you think about just Wellington City, for example, there's 4, it was the first economic centre of New Zealand. So in a colonial sense, it has this incredibly diverse history represented in historic buildings. Secondly, the topography of Wellington is extraordinarily different from all the scenarios you put up there from the United States or from Australia or from other Western countries. And also the weather is extremely extreme. So as a multinational, it seems to me that you lack a nuance of this localised, these issues that we can't get rid of. You can't walk out of that door and not see the hills, the small sky, which means there's not very much sun in Wellington, unlike Christchurch or Auckland. And if you take the reality of public transport, if you look at Google Maps, as planners have done recently, thinking about the Johnsonville public train, it's a fabulous train and it goes through all these suburbs, terrific, it should be outzoned. What they don't see from Google Maps is it rises 450 metres. It is the steepest railway in all of the United Kingdom. It has 7 tunnels and it's one track in one direction. So this intensification idealism is often disconnected from the reality that we see on the ground.
So we didn't phone this in from Canada. I've lived in Wellington for many years. Hayley Hooper is a born and bred Wellingtonian, so she's from Capital. And Alex also is a Wellingtonian. He's from Lower Hutt. So there was a lot of local presence and people that have grown up here as kids. What you might see whilst looking for specificity is a deliberate attempt to make prototype approaches so that there was a sort of a generic overlay on which the intention is that you take these sort of aspirational ideas and then you overlay them on the actual reality of the localities that you're talking about. So that's where that kind of sits. We made a sort of deliberate attempt to not make it about one thing, because one of the dangers we were concerned about is somebody may look at it, I don't know, for example, Paraparaumu, just that's not our place, doesn't work like that, therefore it doesn't relate to me. So we tried to keep it high level as possible. It's good feedback. Maybe we could delve a little bit further down and try and make it a bit more regional, or identify yourself in it. But that sort of feels like a next step for what the intention of this project was. Anything to add to that?
Right. The only thing I would say, all the things that you raised there, I would see them quite differently as arguments for this kind of design. Actually, just to give the character issue and preservation of character, the co-house, the one in Grey Lynn, there was a villa on that site, a beautiful old villa, but it couldn't stay where it was. But instead of demolishing it, they moved it to a corner, incorporated it in the development, and then built the medium form around it. So that was a really good example of exactly, I guess, what you're talking about. In terms of Wellington-centric scenarios, we actually purposefully steered clear of that in this particular toolkit, because we're so aware that Wellington City has already done lots of great work about, urban design and so on there. And we wanted to give the other areas around the region a bit of love. So that was kind of quite a deliberate approach. But we'd love to extend this, and add more scenarios. It would be amazing. Yeah, and then we could, incorporate. We'd love to talk to you more about that. Yeah. We will need a little bit of funding to do that, but
it's a hand that's been up for a little while. Just here.
Hi there.
Hey.
Alex, hi. I was keen to hear more about whether it's come up in the talk. It looks great, by the way. Has a lot of, or more information about, or specific treatment about the co-living. I know that developments and for gentrification is often challenged by the social ownership and like if you've got an apartment block and then everybody has to pay a bit towards I'm just wondering if there's much exploration of those different forms of ownership and governance in the community as a part of this, because I feel like it's like a really interesting challenge.
No, I fully agree with you, and I was saying earlier that the economic sort of roots sit behind empowering all of this, whether it's market driven or whatever. But this is step one of trying to encourage people wanting more and different options, and then from the back of the intentions that then develops into different funding opportunities. A whole bunch of stuff that's going on in the UK at the moment, not to be too international about it, but that have worked in of providing different mechanisms of funding, how you can claim back tax, how we pay the council to do the work, how it then rates, how it encourages private development, a myriad of stuff that come wanting more options ultimately. So no, it's not in here. It's kind of like a next conversation. Yeah, it'll be a fascinating subject to do that. Yeah.
Jordan, thanks very much for that. My name's Debbie Early. I'm curious to know more about the research and actual efficiency, practicality of the application of urban agriculture. Have you got any details about that? I know in your design there you showed aspects of urban agriculture, but what is the idea? Is it actually recreational pastime and hobby? Is it community building, or is it actually food production? And what sort of research have you done with regards to that sort of quantity? Because just from my own experience, I enjoy gardening, but I'm not very good at actually growing my own food. But it some people are. There's some great examples in South London, for example, that have pulled people together. But to answer your question, in the context of what we're looking at here, it was very much about cohesive communities, about pulling down those barriers between units and sense of stewardship and ownership, because there's a whole bunch of benefits that come out the back of that. So people looking after their own area, it being safer, people stewarding and making sure it's less dangerous in a way. And so there is a huge link between urban agriculture and communal recreation and a much safer environment. And so it's come from that in many ways. You could argue that as you start to go out into those lower density areas, you get more space, and you could argue it starts to become a bit more industrial in its level, and you're looking at a particular scale that can then go to market and all that kind of stuff. But in the more denser areas, it's very much sort of community activity.
There's a few comments online just about people commenting on for these to work, just the importance of varying housing sizes and also varying bedroom sizes to help create pages and stages. So this has catalyzed some really valuable reflections, and even the need for a follow-on guide. An advocacy tool demonstrating the inverse, I think, excellent idea. Yes, please. Question number.
Sure. I heard us talking a little bit about the regulations or regulatory framework that could help enable this. And I appreciate that the toolkit is a pragmatic guide and really fantastic form of helping people come to normalise the idea and accept the idea. But have you had any time to think about any further changes to regulation or how things? Maybe it's actually more financial.
Yeah, it was almost part of the setup of the project. Sorry.
No worries.
Could just go. It was actually part of the beginning of the setup of the project, I think, because we had some very deliberate discussions about how prescriptive do we want to be? Do we want to start pulling over into that kind of policy and making statements and providing you must, shall, may, should guidelines? And we've deliberately steered away from that to keep it high level and to not be a kind of prescriptive, saying earlier, document. I mean, it feels like a following stage, yeah. But we sort of put a line through that right at the very beginning in terms of what we wanted out of this project.
I can potentially add to that and say In particular, the Infrastructure Commission has done some really good work about what changes would need to be made in the incentives, disincentives, economic tool space. One of the points that they made I'm pretty sure it was them, and they've done some great work here, because they also support from a pure economics perspective, this kind of, not continuing to sprawl out and out and out. It actually does not make sense to continue to allow that kind of development, because it's really, really expensive for the public purse and not great for those people who are having to, travel long distances to get to anything. But they've done some great work around this. And one of the observations they made, for example, is very rarely are development contributions truly reflective of the cost to the public purse of, say, greenfield compared to, say, compact, urban form that's more compact and where there's going to be a lesser cost. So this is an area, this is not for us we don't work in that space, but this is something that a government commission has highlighted through lots of research. So that's one thing. Lots of other things in that space. Other things are land taxes and things like that. There is in the taxing system, there's lots of tools that could be used that we've shied away from in New Zealand. Let's not get into that today. But that, for example, encourages land banking and so on within the urban footprint that could be freed up to do this kind of awesome development, but isn't, because someone's sitting on it and they are not disincentivized from doing so. In fact, they are only rewarded for that.
Thank you. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to everyone who's attended online and in the room. It's such an important conversation, and I love Alan's opening words that to predict the future, we can design it. So I think that's a really lovely, empowering reminder that we do have agency, and gathering together to share these ideas is really important. A little bit of a plug, we have another talk like this coming up the 28th of August with Brad Crowley, who's the Sustainability Manager at the New Zealand Green Building Council. Got any questions, please feel free to email us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much. Alan, that was an excellent representation of your team.
Yes, and thanks everyone for coming out today.
Thank you to Catherine for making this happen.